Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Today I'm going to go through the Sutta of Sakka's questions to the Buddha. This is the 21st Sutta of the Digha Nikaya, the Sakka Sutta. It has a number of unique and interesting features. It concerns the Dewa Sakka, who is the king or supreme deity of the Tawatingsa gods, coming to earth to have a meeting with the Buddha, and they have a conversation. Thus have I heard, once the Lord was staying in Magadha to the east of Rajagaha by a Brahmin village called Ambasanda, to the north of the village on Mount Videha in the Indasala cave. So already here in that name a connection to Sakka, because Sakka is Indra, the Vedic god Indra, and the Pali version of the name Indra is Inda, and this is the Indasala cave. So the sala is like we call this building the sala. It's like a pavilion or a meeting place. And at that time Sakka, Lord of the gods, felt a strong desire to see the Lord. And Sakka thought, where is the Blessed One, the fully enlightened Buddha, now staying? Then perceiving where the Lord was, Sakka said to the 33 gods, Gentlemen, the Blessed Lord is staying in Magadha, in the Indasala cave. How would it be if we were to go and visit the Lord? Very good, Lord. And may good fortune go with you, replied the 32 gods. It's the 32 gods of Tawatingsa. That's what the name Tawatingsa means. It means 33. Then Sakka said to Panchasika of the Gandhabas. Panchasika is one of the Gandhabas. The Gandhabas are a lower class of Dewas. They're the heavenly musicians. The Blessed Lord is staying in Magadha in the Indasala cave. I propose to go and visit him. Very good, Lord, said Panchasika. Taking his yellow baluva wood lute, he followed in attendance on Sakka. This character, Panchasika, is one of the Gandhavas who comes up often in the stories. Panchasika means 5 tufts. He apparently wore his hair in 5 tufts, and he took the form of a youth, physically very good looking. And the baluva wood lute he actually acquired from Mara. When Mara gave up on his last attempt to turn the Buddha aside from the path, he dropped his lute on the ground dejectedly and sat with hung head, and Panchasika basically stole it, picked it up and took it away. So it was originally Mara's lute. Actually, the Pali is a vina. It's not quite a lute, but it's a similar stringed instrument. He followed in attendance on Sakka, and just as swiftly as a strong man might stretch forth his flexed arm or flex it again, Sakka, surrounded by the 33 gods and attended by Panchasika, vanished from the heaven of the 33 and appeared in Magadha on Mount Videha. Then a tremendous light shone over Mount Videha, illuminating the village of Ambasanda. So great was the power of the gods, so that in the surrounding villages they were saying, Look, Mount Videha is on fire today. It's burning, it's in flame. What is the matter that Mount Videha and Ambasanda are lit up like this? And they were so terrified their hair stood on end. This is a feature of the higher classes of beings, when they appear in a lower realm, if they're perceived at all, it's only as light. So when Dewas come to earth, to the human realm, they're either completely invisible or they're perceived as a brilliant light. And it's only with the development of psychic power like the Dibbachaku, the divine eye, that one can perceive the form of devas, unless the devas deliberately choose to manifest in a coarser form. And the same applies to when a Brahma god descends to the level of the devas. There's another sutta where Mahabrahma goes to visit the devas of the 33, and he only appears as a brilliant light at first. And then Sakka said, Panchasika, it is hard for the likes of us to get near the Tathagatas when they are enjoying the bliss of meditation, and therefore withdrawn. But if you, Panchasika, were first to attract the ear of the Blessed One, we might afterwards be able to approach and see the Blessed Lord, the fully enlightened Buddha. Very good, Lord, said Panchasika, and taking his yellow baluva wood lute, he approached the Indasala cave, thinking, as far as this is neither too far nor too near to the Lord, and he will hear my voice. He stood to one side, and then to the strains of his lute he sang these verses extolling the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Arhants, and love. So this now follows Panchasika's song, and this is kind of a bit comical in a number of ways. One, Sakka doesn't want to bother the Buddha, so he sends in his underling Panchasika to, get his attention. Buddha's in meditation. And then Panchasika, the Gandhaba, who remember they're musicians, he sings this song that's very inappropriate, let's say. You can't imagine bothering the Buddha with this. And then the next section is Panchasika's song, and it's all in verse. Lady, your father Timbaru greet, O sunshine fair, I give him honor due. Surya Vachasa, the name of Panchasika's beloved is the Gandhaba maiden Surya Vachasa, which means shining, sunshine is a good translation. And it's said that her whole body from head to toe glowed like the sun. And so he's saying to her, greet your father, give him honor due, by whom was sired a maiden as fair as you, who are the cause of all my heart's delight. Delightful as the breeze to one who sweats, or as a cooling draught to one who thirsts, your radiant beauty is to me as dear as the Dhamma is to the Arahants. So every now and again he throws in one of these comparisons. They're the whole thing is really inappropriate. Just as medicine to him who is ill, or nourishment to one who's starving still, bring me, gracious lady, sweet release, with cool water from my consuming flames. The elephant, oppressed by summer heat, seeks out a lotus pond, upon which float petals and pollen of that flower, so into your bosom sweet I'd plunge. As an elephant urged by the goad pays no heed to pricks of lance and spear, so I, unheeding, know not what I do, intoxicated by your beauteous form. By you my heart is tightly bound in bonds. All my thoughts are quite transformed, and I can no longer find my former course. I'm like a fish that's caught on a baited hook. Come embrace me, maiden fair of thigh. Seize and hold me with your lovely eye. Take me in your arms, it's all I ask. My desire was slight at first, O maid, of waving tresses, but it grew apace, as grows the gifts that Arahants receive. Whatever merit I have gained by gifts, to those noble ones may my reward, when it ripens, be your love most fair. As the Sakyan sun in Jhana rapt, intent and mindful, seeks the deathless goal, thus intent I seek your love, my son. Just as the sage would be rejoiced if he were to gain supreme enlightenment, so I'd rejoice to be made one with you. If Sakka, lord of 33 gods, were perchance to grant a boon to me, it's you I'd crave, my love, for you so strong. Your father made so wise I venerate, like a sal tree blossoming, for his offspring's sake so sweet and fair. So imagine being that cheeky to the Buddha. When he heard this, the Lord said, this is the Buddha speaking now, Panchasika, the sound of your strings blends so well with your song, and your song with the strings, that neither prevails excessively over the other. I think it's quite a diplomatic comment. He's not saying anything about the content of the song. He's saying, oh, your voice blends well with your flute playing, your lute playing, and your lute playing blends well with your voice. When did you compose these verses on the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Arhants, and love? Lord, it was when the Blessed Lord was staying on the banks of the river Naranjara under the goatherd's banyan tree prior to his enlightenment. At that time I fell in love with the lady Bada, bright as the sun, daughter of King Timbaru of the Gandhabas. But the lady was in love with someone else. It was Sikadi, the son of Matali, the charioteer, whom she favored. And when I found that I could not win the lady by any manner of means, I took my yellow baluva lute and went to the home of King Tumbaru of the Gandhabas, and there I sang these verses. It's not repeated in the text, but there's an ellipse that he sings the whole thing again. It's just that's like the ancient Indian equivalent of standing outside the girl's house with a boombox. And Lord, having heard the verses, the lady Bada Sarawachasa said to me, Sir, I have not personally seen the Blessed Lord, although I have heard of him when I went to the Sadama Hall of the 33 Gods to dance. And since, sir, you praise the Blessed Lord so highly, let us meet today. And so, Lord, I met the lady not then but later. Then Sakka thought, Panchasika and the Lord are in friendly conversation. So he called to Panchasika, My dear Panchasika, salute the Blessed Lord for me, saying, Lord Sakka, King of the Gods, together with his ministers and followers, pays homage to the feet of the Blessed Lord. Very good, Lord, said Panchika, and did so. So Sakka's getting impatient. So I sent that Panchasika in to get the Buddha's attention so I can meet with him and talking about his girlfriend. Panchasika, may Sakka, King of the Gods, his ministers and followers, be happy. For they all desire happiness, devas, humans, asuras, nagas, gandhabas, and whatever other group of beings there are. For that is the way the Tathagatas greet such mighty beings. After this greeting, Sakka entered the Indasala cave, saluted the Lord and stood to one side, and the 33 gods with Panchasika did the same. Then in the Indasala cave, the rough passages became smooth, the narrow parts became wide, and the pitch-dark cavern became bright owing to the power of the devas. Then the Lord said to Sakka, It is wonderful, it is marvelous that the Venerable Kosya, that's another name for Sakka, with so many things to do, should come here. Lord, I have long wished to visit the Blessed Lord, but I have always been so busy on behalf of the 33 that I was unable to come. Once the Blessed Lord was staying at Sawati in the Salala hut, and I went to Sawati to see the Lord. So this is quite a powerful image here. There's this narrow, dark cave, and the gods enter, and it all becomes wide and vast, spacious hall, brilliantly lit. At that time the Lord, this is Sakka still speaking, at that time the Blessed Lord was seated in some form of meditation. Then King Wesawanna's wife, Bunjati, was waiting on him. Wesawanna is one of the gods, the four gods of the 4 great kings. Lady, please salute the Blessed Lord for me and say, Sakka, King of the Gods, with his ministers and followers, pays homage at the Lord's feet. But she said, Sir, it is not the right time to see the Blessed Lord. He is in retreat. Well then, lady, when the Blessed Lord rises from meditation, please tell him what I have said. Lord, did the lady salute you on my behalf, and does the Lord remember what she said? The Buddha replies, She did salute me, King of the Gods, and I remember what she said. I also remember that it was the sound of your chariot wheels that roused me from my meditation. Considering that Sakka's chariot is said to be a yojana long and his 100 horses, flying horses that pull it, probably makes quite a racket. Lord, those gods who arose in the heaven of the 33 before I did have told me and assured me that whenever a Tathagata, a fully enlightened Arahant Buddha, arises in the world, the ranks of the devas increase, and those of the asuras decline in numbers. In fact, I have witnessed this myself. Now this is a bit odd. This struck me as a bit odd, this statement. First of all, he says, This is Sakka saying the gods who arose in the heaven of the 33 before I did. As that doesn't really fit with the other story about the origin of Sakka. When him and the 33 came up to Tawatingsa, it was inhabited by the Asuras, and they threw the Asuras out and took over. So I don't know what gods he's referring to here, since he was in the first group that entered Tawatingsa. But these stories are not always completely consistent. And this does come up in several places, the idea that there's the eternal battle between the Devas and the Asuras, and the fortunes of that war depend largely on the quality of the humans in the earth, because if there's a lot of good people keeping the precepts and following the Dhamma, then when they die, they're reborn in the Deva realm, and the Deva's numbers increase. But if there's a lot of heedless and immoral people, when they die, they become Asuras and swell up the ranks of the Asuras. So the battles at this higher level reflect what's happening on the lower level. And then the Sakka goes on. He tells the story about a human woman who was reborn into Tawatingsa. There was, Lord, right here in Kapalawatu, a Sakyan girl called Gopika, who had faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and who observed the precepts scrupulously. She rejected the status of a woman and developed the thought of becoming a man. Then after her death, at the breakup of the body, she went to a happy destination, being reborn in a heaven state among the 33 gods as one of our sons, known as Gopaka, the Deva's son, or Devaputta. Also there were 3 monks who, having observed the holy life under the Blessed Lord, had been reborn in the inferior condition of Gandhabas. They lived indulging in the pleasures of the 5 senses as our attendants and servants. And this Gopaka rebuked them, saying, "What are you about, sirs, that you did not listen to the Blessed Lord's teaching? I was a woman who had faith in the Buddha. I rejected the status of a woman and was reborn among the 33 gods, and am known as Gopaka, the Devaputta. But you, after having observed the holy life under the Blessed Lord, have been reborn in the inferior condition of Gandhabas." So that's still a good rebirth, but it's a lowly one relative to being a full Deva. It is a sorry sight for us to see our fellows in the Dhamma reborn in the inferior condition of Gandhabas. And being thus rebuked, 2 of those Devas immediately developed mindfulness, and so attained to the realm of the retinue of Brahma. But one of them remained addicted to sense pleasures. So this shows a point that it is possible for Devas to practice the Dhamma, and they can then have good results, even become a stream winner. In this case, he was reborn in the Brahma world. So that's a much higher level than Tawatingsa. Then there's a long section in verse, which I don't think I'll go through the whole thing, because it's a bit repetitive, but it's Gopaka, the woman who became reborn as a male Deva, telling this story in verse, the same story. At one point she says that Sakka, on seeing these Devas reborn out of Tawatingsa into the Brahma world, was dismayed, and he said, "See how these of lesser rank outstrip the gods, the 33. This Gopaka story also occurs in a slightly different version in the Wamanawatu Sutta, and there's a quite beautiful line, I think, in that version where Gopaka is rebuking the heedless Gandhabas, and he says that the circle of the world is too narrow, the realm of Brahma is too low. showing a rejection of samsara, because generally the circle of the world, the Chakrawala, is considered huge, vast. You know, and this represents the physical manifestation of samsara. It's too narrow. And the realm of Brahma is considered extremely high and beyond lofty, beyond human conception, and it's too low. The only goal worth having this one sight on is nibbana, outside of all of this. So after this episode, the Lord thought, Sakka has lived a pure life for a long time. Whatever questions he may ask will be to the point and not frivolous, and he will be quick to understand my answers. So the Blessed Lord replied to Sakka in verse, Ask me, Sakka, all that you desire. On what you ask, I'll put your mind at rest. So up to this point, they were basically making small talk, courteous greetings and stories, but now Sakka is going to ask the Buddha some questions on Dhamma. And being thus invited, Sakka, ruler of the gods, put his first question to the Lord. By what fetters, sir, are beings bound? Gods, humans, asuras, nagas, gandhabas, and whatever other kind there may be, whereby, although they wish to live without hate, harming, hostility, or malignity, and in peace, yet they live in hate, harming one another, hostile and malign. Because the gods of the 33 are not beyond conflict. They still have conflict with the asuras. So he knows this by within his experience. This was Sakka's first question to the Lord, and the Lord replied, Ruler of the gods, it is the bonds of jealousy and avarice that binds beings, so that although they wish to live without hate, yet they live in hate, harming one another, hostile and malign. This was the Lord's reply, and Sakka delighted, exclaiming, So it is, Lord, so it is, welfare. Through the Lord's answer, I have overcome my doubt and got rid of uncertainty. It's jealousy that drives the asuras up the mountain to try and take Tawatingsa. Then Sakka, having expressed his appreciation, asked another question. But, sir, what gives rise to jealousy and avarice? What is their origin? How are they born? How do they arise? Owing to the presence of what do they arise? Owing to the absence of what do they not arise? Jealousy and avarice, ruler of the gods, take rise from like and dislike. That is their origin. That is how they are born. That is how they arise. When these are present, they arise. When these are absent, they do not arise. So this dialogue goes on in the same vein, and it has the same form or spirit as the dependent origination, which is a common theme of the Buddhist teaching, that things arise according to causes, and you can analyze and trace back the causes. So jealousy and avarice arise from liking and disliking. And what do they arise from? They arise from desire. And then each section is the whole long paragraph, but I'll just do the main points. So liking and disliking arise from desire. And what gives rise to desire? Desire, ruler of the gods, arises from thinking. When the mind thinks about something, desire arises. When the mind thinks about nothing, desire does not arise. But, sir, what gives rise to thinking? Thinking, ruler of the gods, arises from the tendency to proliferate. Papancha. That's a term that's been translated proliferation. It's the tendency of the mind to weave complicated stories and narratives and structures, and you get lost in that. When this tendency is present, thinking arises. When it is absent, thinking does not arise. And then Sakka asks another question. What practice has that monk undertaken who has reached the right way which is needful and leading to the cessation of the tendency to proliferation? So how do you put a stop to this papancha? Buddha's reply: Ruler of the gods, I declare there are two kinds of happiness, the kind to be pursued and the kind to be avoided. The same applies to unhappiness and equanimity. Why have I declared this in regard to happiness? This is how I understand happiness. When I observe that in the pursuit of such happiness unwholesome factors increase and wholesome factors decrease, then that happiness is to be avoided. When I observe that in the pursuit of such happiness unwholesome factors decrease and wholesome factors increase, then that happiness was to be sought after. Now, of such happiness as accompanied by thinking and pondering, and of that which is not so accompanied, the latter is more excellent. The same applies to unhappiness and to equanimity. And this, ruler of the gods, is the practice the monk has undertaken who has reached the right way, leading to the cessation of the tendency to proliferate. And Sakka expressed delight in the Lord's answer. So there is a bit of a reference here to jhana and the progression in the jhanas. When the Buddha says, such happiness as is accompanied by thinking and pondering, and that not so accompanied, the latter is more excellent. Happiness is sukha, and thinking and pondering here in Pali is vitakka vichara, the jhana factors. So the first jhana has vitakka vichara, and second and subsequent jhanas, vitakka vichara, are absent. So that happiness is more excellent. The quality of thinking and pondering, the thought formation, is ultimately incompatible with bliss states. Then Sakka, having expressed his appreciation, asked another question. Well, sir, what practice has that monk undertaken who has acquired restraint required by the rules? Ruler of the gods, I declare there are two kinds of bodily conduct to be pursued and the kind to be avoided. The same applies to conduct of speech and to the pursuit of goals. Why have I declared this in regard to bodily conduct? Then he goes into the same thing about wholesome and unwholesome factors. So any bodily contact or mental contact or any goal that increases unwholesome factors is to be avoided, and if it increases wholesome factors is to be undertaken. Then Sakka asked another question. Well, sir, what practice has that monk undertaken who has acquired control of his sense faculties? Ruler of the gods, I declare that things perceived by the eye are of two kinds, the kind to be pursued and the kind to be avoided. The same applies to things perceived by ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. At this, Sakka said, Lord, I understand in full the true meaning of what the Blessed One has outlined in brief. Lord, whatever object perceived by the eye, if the pursuit leads to increase of unwholesome factors and the decrease of wholesome factors, that is not to be sought after, and so on. So it's Sakka here. This is a minor point here that Sakka himself fills in the rest of the formula. He's got the general principle. Then Sakka asks another question. Sir, do all ascetics and Brahmins teach the same doctrine, practice the same discipline, want the same thing, pursue the same goal? No, ruler of the gods, they do not. But why, sir, do they not do so? The world, ruler of the gods, is made up of many and various elements. Such being the case, beings adhere to one or other of these various things, and whatever they adhere to, they become powerfully addicted to, and declare, this alone is the truth, everything else is false. Therefore they do not all teach the same doctrine, practice the same discipline, and want the same thing, pursue the same goal. So are all ascetics and Brahmins fully proficient, freed from bonds, perfect in the holy life? Have they perfectly reached the goal? No, ruler of the gods. Why is that, sir? Only those, ruler of the gods, who are liberated by the destruction of craving are fully proficient, free from bonds, perfect in the holy life, and have perfectly reached the goal. And Sakka rejoiced at the answers as before. Then Sakka said, "Passion, sir, is a disease, a boil, a dart. It seduces a man, drawing him into this or that state of becoming, so that he is reborn in high states or low. Whereas other ascetics and Brahmins of different viewpoints gave me no chance to ask these questions, the Lord has instructed me at length, and thus removed the dart of doubt and uncertainty from me." The Buddha asked, "Ruler of the gods, do you admit to having asked the same question of other ascetics and Brahmins?" "Yes, Lord." "Then if you don't mind, please tell me what they said." "I do not mind telling the blessed Lord, or one like him." "Then tell me, ruler of the gods." "Lord, I went to those I considered to be ascetics and Brahmins because of their solitary life in the woods, and I put these questions to them. But instead of giving me a proper answer, they asked me in return, 'Who are you, venerable sir?' I replied, 'I was Sakka, Lord of the gods,' and they asked me what had brought me here. Then I taught them the Dhamma as far as I had heard it and practiced it, and they were very pleased with even that much. And they said, 'We have seen Sakka, the Lord of the gods, and he has answered the questions put to him.' And they became my pupils instead of my becoming theirs." So Sakka is frustrated. He goes to these different holy men, and they're just blown away by seeing the Devas. And he can't get any answer out of them, so he ends up telling them what he knows. "And they became my pupils instead of my becoming theirs. But I, Lord, am a disciple of the Blessed Lord, a stream winner, not subject to rebirth in the states of woe, firmly established and destined for enlightenment." Now, this is another line that is a bit inconsistent. Here, Sakka is claiming to be a stream winner, a Sotapanna, but we see later, a few pages later in this sutta, it said that he attained stream entry then and there. So he couldn't have been a stream enterer already at this point. There's some bit of inconsistency has got into the text here. "Ruler of the gods, do you admit to having ever experienced such rejoicing and happiness as you are experiencing now?" "Yes, Lord." "And what was that about?" "In the past, Lord, war had broken out between the gods and the Asuras, and the gods had defeated the Asuras. And after the battle, as victor, I thought, whatever is now the food of the gods, and what is the food of the Asuras, henceforth we shall enjoy both. But Lord, such happiness and satisfaction, which was due to blows and wounds, does not conduce to dispassion, detachment, cessation, peace, higher knowledge, enlightenment, nibbana. But that happiness and satisfaction that is obtained by hearing the Dhamma from the Blessed Lord, which is not due to blows and wounds, does conduce to dispassion, detachment, cessation, peace, higher knowledge, enlightenment, nibbana." "And ruler of the gods, what things do you call to mind when you admit to experiencing such satisfaction and happiness as this?" "Lord, at such times 6 things come to mind at which I rejoice." Then there's some verses, not very long, so I'll go through it, but they're a bit cryptic. It's Sakka prophesizing his own future rebirths. And there are different ways of understanding exactly what he means by some of the phrases. But I won't get into all that controversy. I'll just go through this. "I, who merely as a god exist, have gained the chance by karma of another earthly life." So that's the very first stanza is interesting, that he's regarding an earthly life as being more desirable than a life as a Deva. "Leaving this non-human realm of gods behind, unerringly I'll seek the womb I wish to find." So that's a reference to a human birth, because gods are not born into a womb. "My problem solved, I'll gladly live by Buddha's side, by Buddha's law, controlled and mindful, with clear awareness filled." So his desire to be reborn human comes from a desire to practice the Dhamma. So this is not common amongst Devas. He's a very enlightened, far-thinking, far-seeing Deva. Most of them are. so wrapped up in their sense pleasures they wouldn't think this way. And should thereby enlightenment arise in me, as one who knows I'll dwell and there await my end. And when I leave the human world again, I'll be once more a god and one of highest rank. More glorious than the Devas are the peerless gods, this Akanita Devas of the Pure Land, Sudavasa. So that would imply that he would be an anagami at this point. Among whom dwelling I shall make my final home. Okay, so then it's another longish verse where he's just basically praising the Buddha and the Buddha's teaching. And then it winds up, the Sakka, the Lord of the Gods, said to Panchasika of the Gandhabas, you have been of great help to me for gaining the ear of the Blessed Lord, for it was through your gaining of his ear that we were admitted to the presence of the Blessed Lord, the Arahant, the Supremely Enlightened Buddha. I will be a father to you, and you will be king of the Gandhabas, and I will give you Bada Suryavacha, whom you desired. And then the Sakka, Lord of the Gods, touched the earth with his hand and called out 3 times, homage to the Blessed One, Arahant, the Supremely Enlightened Buddha. Homage to the Blessed One, Arahant, Supremely Enlightened Buddha. Homage to the Blessed One, Arahant, Supremely Enlightened Buddha. And while he had been speaking in this dialogue, the pure and spotless Dhamma eye arose within Sakka, ruler of the gods, and he knew whatever things have an origin must come to cessation. And the same thing happened to 80,000 Devas as well. Such were the questions which Sakka, Lord of the Gods, was desirous to ask, and which the Lord answered to him. Therefore this discourse is called Sakka's Questions. So the pure and spotless Dhamma eye arose within Sakka. That's a phrase that occurs frequently to indicate someone has attained stream entry. The opening of the Dhamma eye, the Dhamma Chakku. So stream entry is the purification of the view. And Sakka declared, whatever things have an origin must come to cessation. That's the same declaration that Punnadhammo made at the Buddha's first sermon when he attained stream entry. And it says the same thing happened to 80,000 Devas as well. There's always have to be 80,000 of this and 84,000 of that. But here's the point at which Sakka becomes a stream winner, and there's even more depth to this in the commentary. It's not stated in the sutta, but it's in the commentary that the reason Sakka went to see the Buddha was because he had seen the 5 signs, which is when a Deva reaches the end of their very long lifespan, before they die, they're given a warning. They see 5 signs. This is their version of old age, so much milder than human old age. The 5 signs are their garments become soiled, their garlands fade, they lose their luster, or their luster dims, their armpits grow sweaty, and they become restless on their seat. So when they see that coming, oh, my lifespan is coming close to an end. So Sakka knew he was dying basically from his Deva state, so he went to see the Buddha. And the commentary says that right at the end of this discourse, as he was praising the Buddha, homage to the Buddha, Sakka actually did die, but because of his excellent karma, he was immediately reborn as the new Sakka. So and all these other Devas hanging around didn't notice anything. The only 2 that knew that had happened were Sakka himself and the Buddha. It's just like the same we said previously about Mara. Sakka is, there's always a Sakka in the universe, but being Sakka is not immortal. He dies and there's a new Sakka. But they live for some millions and millions of human earth years. So this is one of the suttas where the Buddha is teaching the Devas. This is when we chant the Atipiso chant. One of the attributes of the Buddha is teacher of gods and men. So, the Buddha did teach Devas and also Brahmas. He was, he was in that higher position of understanding than even the gods. And this is brought out in the incident in this sutta where Sakka goes to these other ascetics and Brahmins, various non-Buddhist holy men in India, and try to see what they could tell him, and they just started to worship him instead. But the Buddha is actually, takes it seriously and teaches him Dhamma. So there are other encounters of the Buddha and Sakka elsewhere in the canon, but this is the longest continuous episode of the Buddha in discourse with Sakka. So I'll stop there.